Released in 2004 based off the movie of the same name released in the same year, it's Catwoman, the video game. What you're currently seeing is the PC version of the game. It's also available on PlayStation 2, Xbox, Nintendo GameCube, and Game Boy Advanced. Developed and published by EA and developed by Magic Pockets for the Game Boy Advanced, and distributed by Warner Bros. Interactive and DC Comics, in Catwoman you play as Catwoman. The story starts off with Catwoman stopping some robbers, then proceeding to rob the store herself, escaping the police, then reminiscing about how she became Catwoman, which basically is the same origin story we see in the movie. A woman by the name of Patient Phillips, working for a large company known as Hedera, accidentally discovers her employer's secret project, some sort of age-stopping makeup cream thing, which has serious side effects. Clayface anyone? One thing leads to the next. She's then chased by some kind of security dude. She tries to escape into a drainage pipe, but then the drainage pipe does what a drainage pipe does. Sure enough, seemingly dead and washed up on shore, some cat goes up to her face, and then she wakes up with the cat-slit eyes, and thus Catwoman is born, or alive, again, or something. As for the game itself, in Catwoman you begin your path for revenge, as you track down the conspirators behind this and the people who murdered you by platforming and swinging. And more platforming. And stealing things. Finding cats in the environments that give you more lives. But is any of this any good? Let's find out first with the good. Graphically speaking, for a 2004 movie license release, Catwoman looks pretty decent. I don't just mean Halle Berry in leather. The game supports HD resolutions, and for the most part, looks pretty solid. The character models are well done, the environments are pretty detailed, and the animations look great. And for what it's worth, the game follows the plot of the movie accordingly. But considering the movie itself wasn't exactly a hit? Yeah, let's now discuss the bad. You know a game is going to be special when you hit new game and hear this.
Oh, a new victim.
Now, despite the overall game looking pretty solid, the cutscenes look awful. For whatever reason, instead of just doing the cutscenes in engine, they do, but they're pre-recorded in low resolution. So instead of running them in engine in 1080p like the game was running for me, instead I was greeted with a low-res, pixelated, blurry mess. Sadly for you folks on YouTube, it'll be hard to see this, and Sony Vegas does a pretty good job of scaling footage. So you'll simply just have to take my word on that. As for the actual game itself, first off, the camera is in a fixed position, so you have zero control over it, and at times it's in some of the most ridiculous places. From the corner of rooms to when you start up the game for the first time, it's right in front of Catwoman for whatever reason. Almost like they were trying to set up some sort of cool establishing shot. Problem is, this is a fucking video game. So you awkwardly push forward and the camera then adjusts, making your character move somewhere else, and it already gives you an idea of what you're in for. Then of course, to one-up the awful camera scheme, the controls are even worse. So picture this, you move with the left analog stick. Okay, pretty standard affair stuff. And then you attack with the right analog stick. So depending on where the enemy is in the environment, you have to then flick the right analog stick in the direction in order to attack them. Now if you're playing on the keyboard and mouse like I was at first, the game doesn't even utilize the mouse. You control Catwoman with the WASD keys, and you attack with the numpad keys, 8, 4, 6, and 2. Obviously, I immediately switched to a controller. Regardless, the combat is utter garbage. For whatever reason, Catwoman simply can't knock out enemies. In order to actually defeat enemies in this game, you have to knock them into an environmental hazard or object to progress. Otherwise, they'll just keep getting up and trying to attack you. Not like that's hard or anything, they take like 2 to 3 seconds to get back up, and you can immediately knock them right back down, making the overall combat in this game a cakewalk. Even if, for whatever reason, you fail to knock them into an environmental object, they'll eventually give up and get scared and just run away and throw themselves into the environmental hazard. Yep. As for the 2 or 3 boss fights in this game, they're the exact same thing, except with the health bar now. You knock them into environmental objects over and over until they're beaten, with once again, barely any challenge whatsoever. However, combat is barely in this game. Most of the levels are 90% platforming based, which would be great and all if the controls were actually good. For one, Catwoman can only climb up a wall in a straight line, so for a lot of the platforming in this game, you'll first have to find a wall you can actually climb, as the game only lets you climb certain ones. Then you'll have to position yourself correctly in order to climb it. Then once you begin climbing, the real fun begins, as you begin to wrap your head around this game's bizarre mechanics. Take for example this thing here. You're supposed to use your whip on it in order to swing across, so the game tells me. So of course I bust out the whip and whip at it. It seems to latch onto it, but I can't seem to swing, so I try and jump and whip at it. Nope. Sure enough, I have to then reclimb my way back up there. After failing that numerous times, I cracked and looked up a walkthrough on the second fucking level of this game, feeling completely defeated already. Turns out you have to first grapple the fence next to you, then use the whip and swing along the wall. Fantastic. This game took me roughly 5 or 6 hours or so to beat, and I'd say a good 75% of this was platforming and constantly falling to the bottom of the level, and then reclimbing my way back up there, trying to wrap my head around the stupid platforming. So really, I'd argue there's only a few hours of content in this game. As for the story of the game itself, it follows the same plot of the garbage movie. Considering how bad the movie bombed, it's not a shock to anyone to say the story in this is pretty awful. Catwoman, instead of being the iconic cat burglar of the Batman franchise, is now a weird, superhuman monstrosity in a movie filled with bad early 2000s CGI. And of course, the game is no better. But with all that being said, now it's time I give the opinion. Surprising nobody, the video game adaptation of Catwoman is awful. The game has absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever. I don't recommend anyone play this or punish themselves by trying to play this. It's not even funny bad, it's just bad. But with that being said, now it's time for my rating, because really I have nothing else to say. It's just an awful video game. You could almost say it's a catastrophe. A catastrophe? What the fuck am I doing?